Joined now by the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast. We welcome John Shannon back to Sekeres and Price. Merry Christmas. How you doing?
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you guys too. It's I'm in Buffalo. Columbus is here tonight, and I got hit with winter, as you do in Buffalo.
Yeah, well,
has winter arrived in Buffalo today?
It has. And you know the stupid thing is that it's arrived in Buffalo. It hasn't arrived in Toronto yet. So
yeah, that's always the case, though. That's snow belt in Buffalo, and we know the roster freeze goes into effect tonight. I do wonder whether the executive freeze is also in place for Jarmo Kekalainen and Columbus as they continue to struggle and without Patrik Laine these days. But speaking of executives, John, we were talking to Frank Saravelli a couple of weeks ago, and he was extolling the virtues of Patrik Allvin, who has since made yet another trade. He leads the league in trades this year. And the job that he's done working around the tough circumstances of cap tightness and everything that challenged about this Vancouver Canucks job. A word or two about Allvin. Is he your executive of the year to this point in the season?
Well, I get he's certainly a candidate. But then you have to also look at what Rob Blake has done in Los Angeles. And the amazing job that Kelly McCrimmon continues to do in Vegas. Maybe we should just have a Pacific Division executive of the year when you think about what all three guys have done, all with cap issues all the time, as every manager does. But yeah, I mean, they've done it differently in Vancouver in so many ways, as you talked about, not being afraid to wheel and deal, finding ways that have taken a couple of the guys that, while they haven't asked for trades, they have been given permission to search. And next thing you know, Connor Garland is happy in Vancouver, playing better in Vancouver, getting ice time in Vancouver. All the discussion about Tyler Myers all summer long, and he's playing better and being, a contributing factor to the success on the Canucks blue line. So, I mean, certainly Patrik Allvin has to be given some credit for the success of what the Canucks have done. And maybe perhaps, guys, in the end, it might be different in Vancouver now, but, there's still people around the league saying, who the heck is Patrik Allvin? And I think that's part of the storyline too, is that here's this guy with a low profile doing all this work, and you can see the results on the ice.
He's been helped by a healthy roster, though, too, right? I mean, and you don't apologize for that, but the Canucks have done well to remain healthy amongst the core players. They've had to deal with some peripheral injuries, Suter and a little bit of Bluger and certainly Soucy, obviously, but they haven't had to miss the core guys, and that's been a huge boost to this team. Well,
and at the top of the core is, a healthy Thatcher Demko.
Yeah.
And let's face it, if we're giving out awards of extolling virtue, then Thatcher Demko's in the Vezina conversation quickly. I'm not one to give out awards before Christmas, but he's one of those guys that when you look at the overall picture of what's going on in Vancouver, Demko's got to be, in my mind, and along with Quinn Hughes, the two key stories for the team.
Well, not only healthy, but like working a lot.
Well, yeah.
A lot.
And obviously, the more we talk about the star power on this team, I think the more we have to talk about JT Miller and the season that he is having, because, like 2 more points on, and he's getting those quiet points, John. He's hanging there in the scoring race with the McKinnon and Kucherov. And, you take a look back at his career arc. He was really at a crossroads when he came here to Vancouver, given up by a second organization, coming off 13 goals in Tampa, work ethic issues in New York that Alain Vigneault got after him about. And he said it was a wake-up call. He knew he had to change. He knew he had to change things. And I mean, he's an all-time Vancouver Canuck when you look at points per game.
I was talking to somebody in the Ranger organization yesterday about Miller, and in their heart, they actually lamented the fact that he was a throw-in in the Ryan McDonagh trade. It was, and the amount of the bodies the Rangers got back, it was all about balancing dollars at that point. And you're right, Allvin did get mad at him all the time. He used to get mad at him when Miller would come back to the bench frustrated and break a stick, and he'd get mad at him for breaking his stick. He's one of those guys that you have to respect and understand his competitive nature, that he's so competitive, wants to do things so well, and just try to be a winner at all costs, that sometimes it sounds and looks like he's being selfish. And he really isn't. He's trying to be the ultimate winner. And I do think that his time in Vancouver has softened a little bit of the external vibration that he's created all the time. But at the same time, it hasn't softened his prolific nature of being a great goal scorer, a great passer, and in my mind, a pretty damn good teammate. And I think those are three good attributes for him and why he's been so successful in Vancouver. And dare I say, remember the conversations 2 years ago when everybody thought that JT Miller was going to be the guy traded at the deadline. And people kept saying, well, why would you trade him? He's pretty damn good. He's a good player. Yeah. And in the end, Rutherford and Allvin recognized that, and he got signed to the long-term deal.
Well, and a couple other things. Number one, Harman Dial of The Athletic has a story out where he tells the anecdote of Miller actually successfully lobbying Bruce Boudreau to go back on the penalty kill unit last year. Like, Boudreau was all set to take him off. They were really struggling, and JT's competitiveness and pride just wouldn't allow it. And he went into coach's office and talked his way back onto that unit. And you look at their power play this year, John, I think a lot of it can be attributed to the fact that Miller is just so good, so smart on that half wall and understanding where the puck needs to go, because they're less static this year. There's a lot more movement on the power play. And I think part and parcel of Brock Boeser's great season is JT Miller at even strength and on the power play, understanding when and where he needs the puck.
I fully suspect that Boeser has watched a lot of JT Miller, and the one thing you can say about Miller, he's never afraid to shoot. That's always been part of his DNA. And there are probably times in Boeser's time that he hasn't shot enough, and that's certainly not the issue this year.
He loves to be rolling downhill. He loves that momentum.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And you know what?
It's a good look for them.
We kind of drew this comparison when Horvat got traded to Matt Duchene leaving Colorado, and it's looking more and more true in that, Horvat's doing just fine with the Islanders. He's having a very nice start to the season here. It's not to say that they got rid of a player that they thought was necessarily falling off a cliff, but you had to make a choice. And I think many people, probably myself included, would have said if you have to lose anybody on this team that we had sort of come to know as part of the core, everybody would have elected Boeser. In the end, whether it was by circumstance or by choice, it's Horvat that leaves, Boeser stays. Boeser's leading the league in goals. Like, that choice of who to sacrifice for the greater good of the roster, that the Canucks have, well, again, whether it's luck or whether that was actually by design, only they know. But that's worked out for them.
Well, it's also about dollars, Blake. I mean, when you look,
that's why they had to make the deal. Yeah,
right. But in the end, they knew what it was going to take to keep Horvat for 8 years. Look at the contract. Look at the contract that he signed in Long Island. And wasn't it Lou Lamoriello that said it was too much and too long?
Yes.
So Jimmy Rutherford had the opportunity, and Patrik Allvin had the opportunity to move him. Boeser was never going to cost as much as Horvat. He was never going to get the term that Horvat thought he deserved. So at a certain point, common sense prevails, and you're right. It has proved to be a pretty good move, despite the fact that the return for Horvat has not really worked out perfectly for the Canucks.
What do you think they should do? What do you think they can do with regards to Nikita Zadorov and re-signing him? Unrestricted free agent to be, needless to say, is going to have some suitors in free agency if he gets there. He's a specific profile of defenseman, and they're very difficult to come across. Somebody with that kind of size and yet that kind of mobility and pretty good with the puck. Would you go about trying to lock him up here between now and the deadline, John? Would you take a more patient approach and What do you think you would do in terms of how many years you'd be willing to go to on Zadorov?
You know,
for 20?
I'm almost suggesting it's too early, Matt. I still think it's too early. I'd like to have Rick Tocchet have 25 games with him to say, what do you think of this guy? Does he help us? What kind of asset? You know, hockey teams get blinded by size a lot of times. And this guy he's a brute. He's massive. But does he fill a void on the blue line? Does he do what Rick and Adam Foote want him to do on the blue line? I as much as I know that everybody always is trying to be proactive and saying we got to do this, we got to worry about the long term. I think that there are times where you have to take your time on that decision and say, okay, does he really help us in the long term? Is he what we want? And you really only know that when you're in the room with him. You really only know that when you're on the bench with him and when he's on the ice. And I might suggest it's just a little too early to figure out what to do with Zadorov yet.
It's a tightrope walk, though, isn't it, John? Because the longer you wait, for the reasons you just outlined, and very good reasons, the longer you wait, the bigger sample size you get to make a more educated decision. The closer that player is to actual unrestricted free agency, that player might just think, or we just wait 5 more weeks and everybody gets to bid.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But it also, what that puts into focus, guys, is the role of pro scouting. You know, and our teams out there every day, you know, making sure that they've watched these players enough, understand the players, being on the road, watching, not just doing video, but, you know, the eyeball test. How many times were Canuck scouts in the Saddle Dome watching Zadorov do what he does? Because a lot over the years, and both of you have seen this, a lot of guys get traded because they were good against that very team.
Yes.
People say, boy, like I remember Cliff Fletcher traded for Rick Walmsley because every time Rick Walmsley played the Calgary Flames, he was brilliant. So you trade for him. Not to say that Walmer wasn't good in Calgary, but it's just one of those things that every once in a while people say, well, he's always good against us. He must be a good player. And that's not necessarily the case. You need a sample size that you can deal with. And that's what the pro scouts have to do before the acquisition of the player, and then before you decide to make a long-term commitment to him.
Do you we've had this debate this week, and 5 wins in the last 6 will sort of do that to you. But you take a look at where the West is now. Obviously, you've already mentioned the Kings and the Vegas Golden Knights, 2 pretty good teams, not to mention that Colorado team on the other side is pretty good. And we'll see Dallas on Thursday, albeit without Jake Ottinger.
By the way, don't you better add Winnipeg.
Oh, really? Am I okay? Am I going to hear about it from the Happy Haligonian? We've talked about the amazing job that has been done there in Winnipeg, given where they were at, given that the head coach had to take leave of the team. So, yes, well done, Winnipeg Jets. Now it's time for the city to step up and buy some tickets. Blake and I were both talking about that yesterday as well.
And now Bonus can call Jacques Martin the old guy, by the way.
Yeah, that's true, huh?
Yeah.
Well, yes, of course. Both of them have history with that franchise.
That's true.
Yeah. Jacques got the better of it. Poor Rick inherited the expansion file there. But Pettersson and Hronek are going to cost them more money next year. The Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout is not as favorable next year as it is this year, not to mention all these UFAs that they either have to resign or find replacements to. It's clear they need a top 4 right shot defenseman. It's clear they need another winger to play with Elias Pettersson. How aggressive do you anticipate Rutherford and Allvin will get between now and the trade deadline? Looking at not just this team and the position that it's put itself in, and a lot of GMs now talk about how, hey, the room earned this opportunity. I went out and did this because the guys down there earned it. Not only looking at this year, but also looking at the future and what's to come here in terms of cap pain.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the conversation in the office too, is to say, okay, are we? I mean, how serious are we to go deep into the playoffs? And then are we going to be able to shed enough money in the offseason and replace that money in order to be competitive next year and still enhance what guys like Pettersson need to do in order to play. It's a real dilemma. And it's not only Vancouver in that dilemma. I think there are probably 12 or 13 teams thinking that way. So I don't know if there is a simple answer to it, Matt. I really don't. I would tell you that there's a real belief, and it's similar to Major League Baseball now, that you go to free agency and you find interchangeable parts for your bullpen. You find interchangeable parts as that fifth starter in the rotation, and then you spend all your money trying to find guys that can hit the ball out of the park. So the answer is, quite frankly, is I'm not sure, because you're on a roll, you're playing well, you have recaptured the market. They are in love with this hockey team again, so you don't want to waste that. You don't want to waste that affection of this really hardcore fan base. But at the same time, you do have to look down the stretch. You do have to look to next year. And I don't know if there's a simple answer. These guys have a list of free agents they can deal with after July 1st. But then that's the challenge of, you have to create space between now and whether it's the trade deadline or the end of the season in order to be competitive with the free agent world. So I'm not sure there's a simple answer to that. My thinking is that they will stay the course until the summer and then try to retool after July the 1st.
On the TV side of things, we see that there's a change on Hockey Night in Canada. Talk about Cassie Campbell-Pascal and her moving on to different pastures. We hope they're greener. We hope the league does well, but that was an interesting decision for her. Yeah,
and it's I don't know whether it's a lifestyle one. I sent Cassie a note this morning wishing her the best, but I haven't got anything back yet. I'm sure she's a little busier with her new job. But she was traveling every week to Toronto to do Monday Night Hockey. She was still doing some ESPN work in the United States. So this one, to me, I think probably speaks to her passion for helping the women's game grow and for being part of the success of the women's game. They're going to need a lot of help, and they're going to need some big voices. And she certainly is a big voice, someone who understands what it takes on so many different levels. And I certainly hope that they give her the leeway to be active in helping this league grow. And I think they're going to miss her on television. I mean, she was the first woman to be a color person on Hockey Night, and she's always been a bit of a trailblazer, and hopefully she's part of a trailblazing league to help the women's game grow.
Lastly, for me, because this is our last hit, Mr. Shannon, until 2024. Hey, just Christmas, Boxing Day falls on a Tuesday this year, and then same goes the next week after the New Year's. But are you ready for a World Junior Championship where Canada is the third choice?
Is it?
Well, I mean, everybody keeps telling me how great Sweden and the USA are. Well, what do you think of this spot for Canada?
Royal Commission.
And do you think we are marching towards a Royal Commission about our lack of goaltending?
Our lack of goaltending, for sure. Not just at the junior level, but how about everywhere? Thank
God for Aiden Hill, John. If it wasn't for Aiden Hill, I'm not sure we could even put a starting goaltender in the net.
Our starting goalie our starting goaltender for the Four Nations Cup.
That's right. Whatever we're going to call it.
Well, that's as good a name as ever. Just steal that one from the women. Why not?
Yeah,
it works. It's probably where the idea came from anyway. So let's just run with it. The American. I'm not sure about the Swedes, but I'll tell you what, the Americans are really good, and they should be the favorite. The only solace every Canadian can take is that it's tough to be the leader. Everybody's been following us for a long period of time, and I'm glad that everybody outside of Canada loves our game too.
And they didn't even take the leading scorer in the OHL.
Yeah. Well, here's what I know. There is a lot of material for that Canadian coaching staff to message with these boys in the dressing room.
Yeah.
Like, you tell Macklin Celebrity, by the way, Mac, they think you're going to win bronze this year. So,
well, I tell you what, adding Quatra from Boston is a big add.
That's
Yeah.
true.
And by the time they get to the middle round, he will be a huge contributor to the success of the team.
Yeah. Great stuff, John. Thank you for everything in 2023, my friend. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Happy New Year, and we'll catch back up in 2024.
Thanks, John.
And Merry Christmas to everybody. Hope everybody has a great time over the holidays, and don't eat too much, don't drink too much, but still have a lot of fun.
Too late.
That's all the fun.
This clip brought to you by the VGH Millionaire Lottery. Order now for your chance to win one of 10 grand prizes. For tickets, go to millionairelottery.com.